Dimelang, it's me, Noni Kumalo, and this is Take It to the Booth, brought to you by Y. And this is where we have some very serious conversations around elections. So, for a political system to work, it needs to be representative, which means that every part of society needs to be included. That is why it is important for young people to go out there and make their mark. So, if you've gone out there and you've registered to vote, well done and congratulations to you. But if you haven't, or you have, but you're not so sure if you should be heading to the polls on the 29th of May, then that's why we're having this conversation today. A quick reminder that any views shared on this podcast episode do not reflect the views of Y or the Nelson Mandela Foundation. But what I want you to do is to come a little bit closer to me, because today we have an extraordinary powerhouse, and her name is Pearl Pillay. Now listen to this resume. She is a youth development expert, a board member of the NYDA, managing director of Youth Lab, and a former WITS SRC member who was at the forefront of the Fees Must Fall movement. She is Ubabes Womzabalazo. She knows tear gas, left, right, and center. Pearl Pillay, welcome to the booth.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you with us.
That was a crazy introduction.
No, really crazy. So I want you to take us through who this 32-year-old extraordinary individual is and all the work that she's done in the last 10 years.
Sure, how much time do we have?
I mean...
that's a big question. I think in very basic terms, you know, I'm a girl from Durban who decided to study a BA and got a lot of luck along the way and a lot of trouble and managed to like build some kind of life out of it. So, I mean, you mentioned WITS, so I moved from Durban to go to university. I studied politics and international relations. There was a small part of my life where I thought I would be a diplomat and like work at the UN and like really make a difference.
I see it though. No.
Although you see, the making the difference part didn't align with the institution that I thought I would work with. So I figured maybe my talents would be better used elsewhere.
Good.
But yeah, I finished my studies, got very lucky to be expelled from WITS, and as I got expelled, I met the founders of Youth Lab, which is the organization that I run. And they saw that I was a newly unemployed student who then definitely needed a job, and they gave me an opportunity. And it's been 10 years of working in youth development since then. I should say, as a point of clarity, I was definitely not at the forefront of Fees Must Fall. I was one of the old people in the background.
Definitely at the
telling
forefront.
all of the young people, you know, this is how you cope when tear gas gets shot in your face. But I think, you know, there were lots of extraordinary young people that were actually putting themselves on the line every day. I think the rest of us that were kind of an older guard were there to kind of just provide some institutional memory and tear gas experience.
I think you're being modest, but we'll move far away from that. But I want you to tell me about what first sparked that interest in being an activist.
Interesting question. So I grew up in Chatsworth. Really cool place, really, I think a good snapshot of a lot of what South African society looks like. And we had a youth center that was actually built by the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Oh,
so nice plug. But we had a youth center built in our community because we'd had this really big tragedy, and I think I must have been in like grade 2 or 3 when it happened, where there was a party that was happening at a nightclub, and there was a stampede in this nightclub, and a bunch of kids died because they were here after school, and they obviously shouldn't have been there. I think the youngest kid that died was like 7 years old in a nightclub in the middle of the day. And part of the reason was that there isn't anything to do in Chatsworth, right? So it makes sense that on a Friday after school, you're not going to the movies or, you know, you're going to a nightclub. And so the foundation brought together a bunch of different partners, and they built this youth center for us. And so I got involved with a lot of the programs there. It was a nice distraction. It was a nice way to kind of stay out of trouble and find something to do with my time after school. And that was, I think, what kind of grounded a lot of the work that I did, because the center was run and is still run by an extraordinary individual who has a really keen love for his community and has spent his life trying to develop the community that he comes from. And so I got involved with that, and I thought this would be a really cool job to do.
Yeah.
I had no idea that if it was a real job, but I was like, if someone could like pay me
Yeah.
to do this kind of stuff. And it was organizing programs for other schools, for other young people that are out of school, for the elderly. It was this like really kind of holistic, varied approach to community development, and I really, really enjoyed it. And figured this is kind of what I wanted to do with my life, and my job was in just to figure out how. And then got to Wits and had no idea what was in store, but kind of got, I have like big overachiever syndrome, and so I had to join all the clubs and societies and like just have my hands exactly, because it was like, I have to have a good CV, because everyone says BA kids can't get jobs, right? So I was like, my degree alone is not going to get me a job. I need to have a hopping CV.
Yeah.
And that's also then where I think I got introduced to organizing at a very like political level. So through organizations like the Wits Palestinian Solidarity Committee, I used to be a part of SASCO back in the day. And that was kind of where politics and I think development and activism all meshed in a really cool way. Wits is, at least when I was there, was a really, really good place to get conscientized, but to also take your consciousness and learn how to turn that into action. And it allowed so much room for students to explore like what that could look like. And so it kind of just like took off from there. And like I said, lots of very right place, right time moments, and kind of got into youth development, and here we are.
So now, holding on to your childhood memory and your memory of being part of the SRC, why is activism so important to you?
I mean, what else is there to do?
Not like that.
I don't know. I guess when we, growing up in a country like ours and in communities like ours, there you live South Africa's issues every day, right? You're not sitting in Houghton talking about what people go through, right? I come from a community where things like domestic violence is completely normalized, right? Everybody knows somebody who's experiencing gender-based violence at home if you're not the ones experiencing it yourself. Drugs are an everyday part of society, right? Everyone knows the house that the drug dealers live in, right? Or the kids that are selling, and I think living in that space and feeling like, but my life could be so much bigger than this, right? And we could do so much more than this. But feeling kind of stuck and not getting the right opportunities, but knowing that they're there, I think it was kind of that sense of like just unfairness, that like kids that grow up in townships can have big, magical, wonderful lives if they have the right resources and people to just invest in them, right? And I think I was lucky that I was surrounded by so many people that had that mindset, and that it kind of just, I absorbed it in some way. And so I couldn't think of a life that didn't involve at least trying to make a difference, right? It's also very rewarding, right? And I think people don't like to talk about it, but it's a great ego boost when you make real impact in people's lives, right? So it's over and above the actual difference your work can make. Like, it makes you feel good. You get to learn. I've learned so much in my career so far about the country and the world that we live in just by talking to the people that live in it. And so I think it was a nice way to kind of also mix my personality, because I'm talkative and I like people and I like doing this, with actually being able to take on issues that I care about with people that I care about, and just trying to find a way to leave this place a little bit better, which I know sounds really like hippy dippy and very like PR. But I think one of the things I learned very early on is that care and being able to express care and use how much you care about a thing to build a life through care is a really important value, I think, to have. And I was very lucky that I was surrounded by so many people that embodied that thing, that it was kind of obvious that I would end up here.
Speaking about making a difference, I want to share a story with you and also say thank you for the work that you've done. So we mentioned that Babes Womzabalazo, right? So back in the day, when we were at the union buildings, and of course we had tear gas thrown at us. I want to say that all that work didn't go in vain, because I'm actually a product of the work that you put in. I got to register at WITS without having to pay my registration fee, and I got to graduate while I was still in debt and receive my certificate because of all the incredible work that you and your team did. So I want to say that I am where I am today because of fighters like you. So thank you so much for that.
That's very, very
I really
nice.
appreciate it. So now let's get into the real conversation. Why did
we're here.
Why did you not decide to go straight into politics and decided to go the other way and not become a president of the youth league?
Hey.
Tell us.
You know, I had my time in politics, right? At WITS and I think at universities across Johannesburg specifically, it used to be impossible to be in any kind of meaningful activism without being in politics, right? Yeah. And I don't have a keen sense of what the student politics looks like now because I've been out of it for so long. But back then, it was such a rich community to be a part of, right? It was a community of learning. And it's not to say that they weren't issues, which they were. But, you know, when you reflect, you must reflect on nice things. Yeah. So it was such a good learning space, but it was also where I learned that I don't actually like this stuff, right? I think politics is a lot about talking about what you're doing and convincing people that you can do the thing, right? And I prefer like doing the thing.
Yeah, I get it.
And so I always said, you know, when I was young and feisty, I'd said, you know, I want to be a practitioner, not a politician.
Okay.
But I think it was, I liked it at the time for what it was, but I think as I got older, it just didn't seem like a space that I was willing to give a lot of my energy to. I think, and politics is important, right? And for everybody that decides to go in there, shout outs to the real soldiers.
Yeah.
But it's a space where there's so much fluff before you can actually get to anything real, right? Elections are a really good way to look at that. It's 5 years of campaigning for you to get a government in, and then you wait and you hope that they're going to get something done. And I think what's been nice about being in the civil society space is that you're surrounded by, number one, people who don't care about the bells and whistles and the red carpet and the blue light brigade and, you know, the business class flights and all of those things. They actually just care about doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, at least my experience through university and all of that was I didn't work as hard as I did to come out and my job must be about like giving speeches and winning elections. I think I just wanted to do something that felt more instantly meaningful.
Yeah.
But also the civic space is a really, really nice place to be in because you don't have to sit, I mean, you see it in politics, right? There'd be a really good idea and someone is not going to do it just because of the party that's behind that idea. And for me, that never made sense, right? Because if you care about this country, if you care about making people's lives better, it shouldn't, that line of thinking just is weird to me. And I get it because that's what politics is. Yeah. But I mean, look now, right? We're in a position where people are talking about coalitions more than ever. I don't have any faith that any of our parties can successfully be in a coalition.
Ooh.
Because we've seen in the past where outside of the obligations of a coalition, when you have an opportunity to cooperate with other parties, the way they end up.
Yeah.
Even when they do form partnerships with other parties, they end up fighting each other. So why should we have any faith that political parties can work together just because now they need coalition partners, right? So yes, I think that's kind of why I made a nice little detour and stayed out of politics. And I genuinely do not see myself ever getting into politics. The role of the president is very unappealing to me. Again, shout out to the men who choose to do it. But I just think there's so much more that we can do without needing to be in those specific spaces, and I'd much prefer to be there.
But now, what is your take on young people that say, you know what, let's leave entrepreneurship, let's leave getting an actual job. I want to get into politics because it just looks so glamorous. They get the nice cars, they get the nice flights, you know, everything is just Georgia. Yeah. What's your take on that?
I mean, that's a product of the political culture that we've created, right? In a world where politicians use public services, right? I would like to go and see a high-ranking government official sitting at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital waiting to get medical treatment, right? But you'll never see that. So in a world where a politician's job or a government official's job is to serve the country, none of that is glamorous. You can fly economy, you won't die, right?
Yeah.
And so what we've done is we've created this political culture that's based on like patronage, right? It's bottles of Hennessy in the middle of a rural area because you created an event where you have to go and unveil a tap that you built, and your after party must be Hennessy,
And
right?
all the celebrities of the country who are there because you booked them for that event.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we've decided that that's what our politics looks like. And so it makes sense in a country like ours that becomes aspirational. Who wouldn't want that, right?
Sure.
Who wouldn't want? In one of my jobs, we were doing oversight with a portfolio committee in Parliament, and we were with them, and so we were driving in their blue light brigade. And I remember sitting there going, "Phew, this is so nice."
Yeah.
Because you're in peak traffic, right? But it can take you 15, 20 minutes to get from Sandton to Vosloorus, right? It was crazy. And I was like, oh, you see, this is how they get you. It's the small ways in which they give you, because convenience looks like luxury in South Africa, because things don't work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You get a little bit of convenience, so you don't have to sit in traffic, or you fly in comfort, or people are just there to serve you and, bend to whatever whim you have. And in a country where we come from so much scarcity,
Yeah.
of course that looks appealing, right? Most young people would look at politics and say, this is a meal ticket, because what other opportunities are there, right? We, at Youth Lab, we have a project, which I'm assuming we'll speak about at some point, called the South African Youth Manifesto.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it is to say that if young people wrote their own manifesto, what would it look like? And so we go to all 9 provinces and we talk to young people. So we've done 2 provinces so far. And in one of the questions we ask people is, would you contest elections? And we've gotten in this iteration of the project so far, a lot more people are saying yes than in 2019 when we did it ahead of that election. And when you ask why, people are very upfront about their answers. I want to be a politician because if I join the ANC, I can get a tender,
Sure.
right? And I can make money because a tender is better than a salary, right? I need job security. It's easy to be a ward councillor in my area and their salary is good. So people are looking at politics like a legitimate career option because we've made it that way. And if we create, I think, boundaries, but if we create accountability mechanisms and if we have higher standards for our politicians, right, there is no reason why we as the nation cannot say we want all public officials to use public services.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can do that. We have so much power as citizens that we don't use because we don't know, right? But if we change the rules of the game, suddenly you can create a politics that's actually about serving the country rather than about all of the perks that it brings. So I don't blame those young people for wanting to do that. It's a viable option if you don't have any others.
Seeing that we are heading towards manifestos, let's talk about manifestos. What are they?
Girl, who knows? So a manifesto is a vision document, right?
Okay.
It is a plan that a political party, and I mean outside of elections, people use manifestos in other ways, but talking about elections, a political party will set out what their goals are, what their plans are should you elect them. Manifestos are important because number one, it gives you a sense of the party's priorities. And in South Africa, I think we vote around singular issues, right? So if you're a student, you might be interested in what a party is saying about fees or about higher education in general. If you are an informal trader, you might be very interested in what people are talking about, the informal economy, right? So, and I think that's what people base their votes on. Like, I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
I care about the child's grant. So a party that talks about maybe increasing grants is going to be appealing to me, right? And And so a manifesto is good because you get to see, oh, these are what this party is prioritizing. Do they align with things that I prioritize? But also, do they have a plan, right? And I think when you look at the big issues, right, so we talk about unemployment, for example, you want to be able to see what is this party's plan to address unemployment?
Yeah.
Do I think that plan could actually work? Maybe I should give them my vote. So it's a list of promises, right, that they're making to you to say, if you trust us with your vote, this is what we are offering for the next 5 years. Manifestos are also good for accountability afterwards, because you should be able to go back and say, on page 6, you said that clinics will stay open 24 hours. You have been in power for a year. What is happening, right? It's a good way to hold parties accountable after they've been elected to say, but these are the promises. You wrote it. We didn't tell you to do this, right? These are your words. How are you standing by them? A lot of parties won't do a manifesto. So it's not a prerequisite for a party to have a manifesto. But I think if you're giving something as valuable as your vote to somebody, the least they can do is write up a manifesto. So I would advise, if a party doesn't have a manifesto, maybe don't vote for them. But yeah, that's what a manifesto is and why we should use it.
Thank you for telling us what they are, because everybody keeps
elections
speaking about manifesto this. Our manifesto says this. But then it leads me to my next question, right? Because I love that you use the example of, in page 6 you said, but the reality is we are not reading these manifestos as
No one's
the
reading
youth
it,
of
except
South
for me,
Africa.
I think.
You know, except for you, right? Are they digestible and are they accessible to the youth?
No, they're not. They are incredibly boring. They are, a lot of them are very long. They are often only in English. They speak in something adjacent to like government policy language. So it's not always easy to understand. They're not trying to have you understand what they're saying, if we're being honest with each other, right? They're saying, oh, we've got all these promises, just trust us, right? And so what people then do is create a resource out of that, right? So I've been seeing it a lot for this election already, and it makes me so happy because it means I have less work. But I know for the 2019 election, one of the things that I did on Twitter was I read every single manifesto for the parties that would be on the ballot. It was about 46 of them. It was not fun. And then provided a 3-tweet summary of each manifesto across, I think it was like 4 different issues. So what is each party saying about these issues specifically? And it was things like unemployment, health, education, and something else. And that thread, people still interact with it now because those parties still exist. They're in parliament. And so people are able to go back and it was something that was so widely used back then because it was the only point of information about manifestos and who was going to be on the ballot, right? For this election, so many people have been doing that. So people are creating election scorecards that rank how parties are talking about specific issues. Lots of people are talking about manifestos. Lots of organizations are summarizing them and putting that information out there. Because I think people have realized that we don't have a voter education culture in South Africa. And especially for young people, we have to create that culture. So a lot of people are doing that work. But manifestos are purposefully difficult, right? There was a party, and I won't mention them by name, but in for the last election, their manifesto was about 300 pages long. And I sat there going, you people are using drugs. This is crazy behavior.
Yeah, because we have to have like 6 jobs because of the economy,
Who's gonna
and
sit
now we must read so many
300
pages. It doesn't make sense.
Like,
it doesn't make sense.
can you even keep up with what your manifesto is saying at this point? Like, a little editing could have taken us a long way here, right? You had parties that didn't do a manifesto. They did like a Facebook post to say, these are our election promises. And I said, you guys are not serious about that. Right? Or parties that would talk about it on their website but not actually have a link to it. So I was phoning parties going, please can you email me your manifesto? Because I'm trying to read it, and
you are very serious about this.
It's not. Listen, I take Twitter very seriously.
I can.
But I think it was also important because at the time we were saying there's so many parties, right? And it was so much less than we're going to have this year. I'm very stressed about all the manifestos I'm going to have to read. But so many people were saying, who are the parties, right? Outside of the big 3, 4, maybe 5. Who are these people, right? And so when you hear you're going to have a ballot, I mean, this year the IEC said, 115 parties that's going to be on the ballot. And I think it's either 6 or it might be 9. We'll have to fact check that. Independents, right? That ballot is going to be a book.
Yeah.
If you only interact with the big parties, the parties that have the budgets for a big manifesto launch or the posters or whatever, right? Those are the only ones you're interacting with. But you have over 100 options to choose from.
Sure.
And nobody is doing, or nobody in their official capacity like the IEC or the parties themselves are doing the work to educate voters about the options available to them. So somebody has to do it, but they are purposefully difficult. They're purposefully inaccessible. Parties don't want you to. We don't have a political culture that's based on ideas, right? It's why you don't see. I mean, they do it in the US. They don't do it well, but they try to host election debates, right? You see the candidates debating each other. Those debates have already started. Right? We don't do that. Can you imagine what it would be like to try and get our parties to debate each other? We tried it once at Youth Lab a few years ago, and it was pandemonium. And almost a physical fight almost broke out because we brought 6 parties into a room and asked them to just chat to each other.
And they couldn't do that.
They can't do it. So because parties don't contest on ideas, they contest on popularity. They're not trying to make their ideas known. And so manifestos are purposefully difficult. But we're so fortunate for this election that there's so many people doing the work to educate people. So at least I think we have the opportunity to be, I think, the most informed electorate if we seek out the information this time.
I love that. And